How to play without a shoulder rest, or more specifically, how can we make our transition into our new setup more smoothly if we're going from wearing a shoulder rest to going to experiment without one. Now, playing without a shoulder rest is not for everyone, I think, and some people have a very strong opinion about this topic, but I am not dogmatic about it, especially since we are all built differently and what works for one person will not work for everyone. Now, I used to wear a shoulder rest quite for a long time, all throughout middle school, all throughout high school. I finally got rid of my shoulder rest when I was 17, right as I was transitioning into my music studies in undergraduate. And let me tell you, it was not a straight path at all. Actually, I briefly had a teacher who made all of their students take off their shoulder rest because they felt so strongly about this. And yes, I agreed that I don't really need a shoulder rest. So I was really open about it. But unfortunately, part of the equation for the new setup was missing, which I will talk about in a minute. And that's why I struggled for a couple of years. Thankfully, I was smart enough to observe how other people play and to see different kinds of setups that different players have. So I learned many things along the way when I had to take certain things into my own hands when it came to my setup. So since so many of you have asked me, how do I play without a shoulder rest? I am making this video to talk about some of the benefits there are to playing without a shoulder rest, and also what to expect on a technical level when you are transitioning, and what are some important things to consider as part of the process that many folks overlook. Now, of course, there are some basic canons to how to hold the violin or viola that are taught to everybody. And of course, I'm not going to get into those details in this video, but there are also fundamentals of the body anatomy, the human body anatomy that we share when it comes to understanding how our systems work. So for example, how our muscular system relates to our skeletal system and our fascia system. Understanding some of those relations are what can aid one into learning how to play without a shoulder rest better. One thing that is very commonly overlooked by people excited to throw out their shoulder rest and try to experiment, which needs to happen with proper guidance, is that we must consider the chin rest as part of the equation and also the width of the instrument. We're talking about the height between here, or if you're using a shoulder rest, it would probably be down here, and the top of the chin rest. This is part of your setup, and the setup is customized for everybody. We all have different size neck, and we have different jaw structure. We have slightly different shoulders in terms of how broad they are or how narrow they are, or our muscle tone, things like that. So different variations, such as the height of the chin rest, whether or not it is centered. Sometimes it's on the side and mine is centered, whether it's more flat or has more of a curvature, whether your jaw prefers to have something to hook on or maybe doesn't like that, the angle of the instrument, all of those things, they need to be trialed. So right now, for example, if you give me a violin with one of those small chin rests on the side, or like a basic Guarneri, and without a shoulder rest, I would probably struggle. I wouldn't be able to play as well as I can play on this setup right here. I wouldn't be as comfortable. Now, as you start your transition, once that shoulder rest comes off, you'll probably notice right away that, and a very important part of the transition, it's to learn not to raise the left shoulder, because it'll probably want to do this to hold the instrument up, or alternatively, you have to be careful that your jaw doesn't start clenching down on the chin rest for dear life and creating tension in the neck. Those are two of the most common things that can happen to someone who starts the transition. So our goal in creating the custom setup is to have freedom in our head and our neck so that we are in as neutral position as we can be. So a great place to start is with the use of a sponge, and I recommend this a lot. It not only gives you a slight extra room here, but it also creates a form of anti-slip, so the instrument won't just slip out, because it can be, you know, slippery if the wood is very smooth, especially if, depending on what clothes you wear, so certain materials, the instrument will slip off. When I was starting out, I actually used a very thin sponge like this, like rectangular, and I covered it with a leather cloth. That was very helpful. And another thing you can do, you can even use a cloth to cover the chin rest if the chin rest is bothering you. I tried it for a little bit. After a while, didn't care too much for it. Again, this is one of those things that you can try for yourself and see what you like. So currently my favorite form of anti-slip is the Magic Pad, because it can literally be placed anywhere. It can literally be placed anywhere on the instrument, depending on where it is that you need that extra support. So for example, if I put the violin up, I noticed that right in here, this is where I just need like this much more. So I memorized where this was, and it's right in the middle there. That's how I know where to place it. Now, I would like to thank very much my body mapper, Stefani, who customized this chin rest for me a couple of years ago and helped me find exactly where this Magic Pad needs to go for me. Previously, I used to actually put it over here in the corner where commonly is placed for students. It worked quite fine for me, and I had a standard Berber chin rest, which is the same model as this. So with my experiments, I actually came pretty close to what my ideal setup should be, at least for how I am currently. But Stefani, thank you so much. She helped me make it even better. Sometimes even this much of an adjustment can be a game changer. So don't expect that what works for you today is the same thing that's going to work for you in 5 years. We need to be open-minded to the fact that our bodies are always changing, and we want to be flexible to the idea that our setup might change again. So I don't know if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't know if this is going to be my setup. Now, on the technical side of things, there are several things that will change without a shoulder rest. Number one, the violin, most likely, depends on the shoulder rest you used, most likely the angle of the violin will be more flat than it used to be. With a shoulder rest, usually it's more of an angle like this. And this will actually allow, having a flatter violin, it will allow for the bow to make better contact with the strings, because it will naturally work against gravity. The strings, they're almost perpendicular to the ground at this point. Of course, the little downside to this is that with a flatter violin, notice that the G string is actually a little bit more to the left and maybe a little bit further away from you than before. For me, that was not such a big deal. So also the lack of a shaped shoulder rest, because, you know, if you think about the Kuhn shoulder rest, a lot of them are like this, right? The lack of a shaped shoulder rest, it allows freedom to adjust the instrument angle that is suited to one's unique body, so, or also regarding the arm length. So some people like to hold it a little more in front, others more off to the side. With my centered chin rest, I am now able to hold it more or less at a 45-degree angle. Before I got a centered chin rest, I was holding it in front of me so much, and it was too much actually, that my arm would come around way too much and would create a lot of tension in the shoulder. I'm glad that I switched to the chin rest in the center, because now I can hold it at a 45-degree angle and I can easily come to the high positions without over rotating here. The second thing that's going to change is that the left thumb will be partially aiding into holding the violin or viola up, and we need to feel that support in the thumb connected all the way to the collarbone. It's almost like one system. Actually, the collarbone is attached to our arm structure. through the shoulder. So the shoulder is just another joint, just like the elbow. So think about from the thumb, goes all the way here and all the way to the collarbone right in here. So since all of this is connected, we can actually think of the violin as an extension of our arm. If we use the collarbone, so if it's set up well, the violin, we can now use the collarbone almost like a little table and hook the edge of the violin or viola right on top of the collarbone. If you feel your collarbone, you can notice that on top it rounds, it almost becomes a little bit flat, just enough to give it a little hook for the instrument to kind of rest on top. And like this, it will feel a little bit more of a natural extension of your body. The violin feels more like it's part of you now. And when I was wearing a shoulder rest, the violin felt a little bit more separate from me. So I actually feel a much better connection to the instrument this way. Now, because of the thumb's bigger involvement, left hand technique will have to go through some kind of revamp, and it's possible that the thumb will need to change a little bit its position and angle from before. Most important is to keep the thumb mobile. If it gets stuck, it's going to create a whole lot of problems from the get-go. As far as vibrato goes, I know this was a question from several people. How do you do vibrato without a shoulder rest? Two things. Number one, check for tension in the palm of the hand when you do vibrato, because if it's tense over here, then the violin will most likely shake. So first of all, make sure that right here feels soft in the palm. And just like any vibrato exercise, of course, we want that first joint to be loose. But so if the first joint is loose and you're doing fine there, do check over here, because usually I noticed this is what causes the violin to shake a lot. Another thing regarding vibrato is you might experiment again with the thumb placement during the vibrato. So relax here and try the thumb further in the back, maybe closer up. Also with the fingers, you can try either hanging the fingers lower down on the neck, or you can experiment with the fingers coming more from above, like this. Again, if I come more from above, then my thumb would be a little further back, like this. But if my fingers are hanging down, then my thumb is a little bit closer. Again, this will be different for everyone. Another thing with vibrato, some people find that without a shoulder rest, wrist vibrato actually becomes easier and more preferable to arm vibrato. I still prefer arm vibrato for the most part, but I do alternate from time to time depending on what I have to play. Coincidentally, when I stopped wearing a shoulder rest, that's when I was actually trying to develop my wrist vibrato. So I don't know if it's just a coincidence or that was a good combination of kind of seeing how wrist vibrato could possibly aid in this transition. Again, see what works for you. But I would say tension here is the number one thing to pay attention to. And if you can feel the release here and also in the thumb with vibrating, that's going to help the instrument to stay more stable. Also, to help with transition, strongly recommend that you spend a lot of time practicing shifts. That's going to especially feel different without a shoulder rest. Personally, I noticed that my thumb's involvement actually created more freedom to shift better with more accuracy, so more in tune. And I began to sense my fingerboard more intimately. I understood my fingerboard better and the relationship between positions better. So shifting upward, the instrument only comes closer to you. So your head can be quite free on the upward shifts. I mean, I can just shift like this, but on the shifts down, those are more challenging. So you would have to use your chin rest and hold the violin just a little bit more on those downward shifts. But then once your downward shift has completed, practice releasing your neck right away. So let's say I'm practicing going from third position down to first. So if I'm going downward shift, I'm holding down on the chin rest and then release the neck once I'm back in first position. By the way, if you're getting any value from this video so far, please give it a quick thumbs up down below so that YouTube is more likely to share it with more people who are seeking guidance on this topic. So in general, when we play with any setup, shoulder rest, no shoulder rest, whatever chin rest you like, doesn't matter what the setup is. The ideal is to keep our head in as neutral position as possible. So for example, when I put my violin up, I try to just keep my head in a normal position, just facing forward. So the violin comes up from above, like kind of lands down on the collarbone there. And then I just kind of nod my head down a little bit, and that's it, right? What I see sometimes, which can create problems, is people who try to bring their head to their instrument. That can create a lot of problems. You see, if I do like this, already my neck over here on the right side, it's becoming tense and also kind of twisted, like when I turn my head a little bit this way. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I'll turn my head to play, but it's really just to kind of glance at the fingerboard. I'm not going like this. That's the thing to be careful with. Also, another thing, we don't want to bring our head forward. Okay, we never want to bring our head to the instrument. We want to bring the instrument to us. Now, something that I am working on for myself currently and to be better at is to hold up the instrument with more involvement of the larger muscles. So the arm structure, previously I mentioned on one side it goes towards the collarbone down to here. Now on the other side, let's say on the pinky side, let me put this down, it goes all the way to the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blade from the back is part of the arm structure. You know, if you imagine that the shoulder is similar to the elbow, just another joint connecting different parts of the whole structure. If we see all of this as one, from the shoulder blade down to the fingertips, when we hold the instrument up, we want to lead with those larger muscles. So this is where I'm going to talk about a big advantage to playing without a shoulder rest. So one problem that I commonly see with people using a shoulder rest, what happens, again, not with everybody, because for some people it works quite well, but what I see often is that the shoulder rest kind of leaves the instrument in one particular position, and what happens is that the shoulder is almost kind of impinged over here, and it's almost like the bicep and tricep, like this, the upper arm, it's not very mobile with the shoulder rest. And what happens is that the larger muscles, they're not quite as involved with holding up the instrument. And what ends up happening is that the forearm greatly overworks. Even though the shoulder rest aids to hold the instrument freely, what happens is that the forearm is working too hard, and that can create flare-ups or even worse, tendinitis. So I find that playing without a shoulder rest, it helps you to be able to lead more from the larger muscles. So I can, like, say, if we hold the instrument up and leading from the back, and then bring the instrument down. Now what happens is that the larger muscles are more activated, especially from below down here. And then the forearm doesn't have to work quite as hard. So it actually helps you to stay injury-free in that sense. Again, I am not anti-shoulder rest. I'm just sharing with you my experience and some things that I've observed over time. Okay, so that's it for this video, folks. If you got any value from it, please consider sharing it with a friend or a colleague and spread the word. Let me know your biggest takeaway in the comment section below. And if you have not already done so, go ahead and grab your free practice template PDF in the description below. Upon doing so, you will be getting access to my latest blogs and videos twice a month, along with maybe some exclusive content that I'm not posting in public. And you'll also have the ability to reach me directly. Until next time, happy practicing.